Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today I have a team of leaders from Hansen. Hansen is a leading global bioscience company that develops natural ingredient solutions for the food, nutritional, pharmaceutical, and agricultural industries. Their natural solutions play a key role in creating a food system that is resilient and prepared to feed a growing population, while also minimizing its diverse climate impact, thereby ensuring greater sustainability from farm to fork. And in the group, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in turn. We have Marlene Boiesen. She is the Commercial Development Manager of Food and Cultures and Enzymes. We have Robert Aguilera. He's the Account Manager for Cultures and Enzymes. And we have Timea Puskas-Larsen, the Global Product Manager for Cheese. So we've got people joining us from all over the world: America, Denmark, Switzerland. And then I'll turn it over to Marlene to introduce herself, and Robert, you can go after her.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Daniel. Yeah, thank you for welcoming us here. It's great to have the opportunity to talk about cheese and opportunities. Working with cheese here, I'm responsible for the ripening portfolio in Hansen, and in that sense also driving a lot of great opportunities with our customers.
Great, thank you. Robert?
Yep. So Robert Aguilera, an account manager, as described by Daniel. I work out of the East Coast in the United States, and I'm also the super user for our tasting tool that works off of the FlavorWiki software, and am responsible not just for helping to organize, but also to put together some unique experiences with tastings for all of our account managers that work not just in dairy, but also in meat, in beverage, and in alternatives, so dairy, alternative to dairy, so plant-based.
Great, thank you. Great to have you. Timea?
Yes, hi, welcome everyone, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to be able to discuss this great topic as this digital tool we have co-developed together with FlavorWiki. My name is Timea Puskas-Larsen. I come from Hansen and responsible for enzymes in cheese production, where I started off this topic on working on taste it, and that's, I think, generally why I'm sitting here also to give a bit of an introduction also how this story started.
Absolutely, yeah, it's been a few years now, so interested to recap. But we've got a great agenda. So you can see on the screen here for those that are watching, we're going to talk a little bit about the general challenges and opportunities in the cheese industry and landscape. We all love cheese for the most part, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see some of the things that maybe the consumers and the rest of the non-industry folks don't understand about its production. And then we're going to talk a little bit about innovation in that. I mean, it's a very traditional product. Cheese is very old, hundreds and hundreds of years old. You can learn a little bit about that from Robert, and then talk a little bit more about sustainability in cheese and the impact of cheese production on the planet and ecosystem. And finally, we will get to the discussion about the Taste It tool and sort of where this very traditional, very important industry of cheese production is going using digital tools and other innovations. So that's the agenda for today. And therefore, maybe we can just start out with talking about like what are the challenges in the cheese industry. I love cheese. I live in Switzerland. I grew up in Wisconsin. I've been eating cheese my whole life, and can remember going on field trips to see it produced. And so Marlene, tell us about what is it that you find as challenges in the industry, and what are you doing there at Hansen?
Well, as you say, it's been here for a long time, and we all love it. And that's also what we keep seeing in different surveys globally, that people, they love it. It's indulging, and they buy it because of the flavor. So if you are a customer, it's important for the customers that they can then fulfill the consumer's wish. So being a consumer and standing in front of a shelf and making a decision to buy a product, a cheese product, it's really the most important driver is the flavor. We can see that the brand, the pricing, that is less important. It is really because we love it and it's indulging. So this ongoing opportunity to then create new exciting cheese experiences, that is really still growing despite high inflation and a lot of other things happening in the world. We can definitely still see that the opportunity for grow in the cheese area, it's really big. So that is, I think, most important here. So we keep together with, as Christian Hansen, we keep together with our customers, finding like what could be a good opportunity. Could it be a new pack size? Could it be the snacking part? We say actually, if you don't have a strategy for snacking, you should go get one, because this is really what we keep seeing growing. So these opportunities are of course pretty big. I think some of the challenges that we foresee right now is that these more maybe long ripened cheeses or more specific cheeses with maybe yeast and mold and these quite maybe strong flavors, they are less, maybe more on a stable status quo right now, because we have a lot of things going on in the world right now, and the milk pool that you then have available could maybe be then used in other ways than what we see in a more normal situation. But it's very little. So again, the main thing here is that cheese is definitely still growing, and we see a lot of great opportunities.
Fantastic. And maybe for those that don't follow the industry, know a lot about how cheese is made, the flavor that you mentioned, this is really something that's created during the production process, right? And this is one of the core inputs of Christian Hansen's in technologies, is how to optimize that and understand the output of the product and efficiency. So would you say that's for the most part what your company is working on and bringing to the table, is an input into that production process?
Yeah, Christian Hansen is definitely a great partner for that. And I think I will let Robert deep dive a bit more maybe into that part. Again, being the commercial development manager for the ripening area, how we discuss and build up these opportunities with our customers, I would like to mention what we call the flavor landscape. It's a landscape where we have 12 pictures that relates then to a flavor direction, and that support our dialogue with the customers in which flavor direction do you think you are today, where would you like to develop and grow, and how can we together build on maybe the opportunities that we see from other markets, or put that into play. So the flavor landscape with these pictures is like a driver for us in a way of establishing a good constructive dialogue, so that we have also a good target and a good opportunity for the customer.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Go ahead.
Indeed, and just to piggyback on that, having the target from the customer and knowing what that target is in a pictorial and a measurable way is really important, because once we know where they want to go, we can then work backwards through the process from packaging to then back to storage and aging, to back to the process in the vat or on a table, a cheddar table, for example, and then even back even further into the milk. I mean, so we have an opportunity to guide, or at least help the customer drive in a direction that they want to go. And it's not just through, here's our product, but it's through a lot of knowledge and a lot of understanding. And we'll get into this in a little bit, of those traditional products that have existed for eons. They're really what are always driving our minds. And in a sense, we can go anywhere with a customer as long as we have a target. And so that's really key. It's really important. But any driver, any point in that process, from milk all the way through packaging, even in packaging on the shelf, that's all really something we can have an effect on.
Okay, that's thank you for the background. It's great to know. Yeah, there's so many different types of cheeses. It's even more than wine. Like, it's like everywhere you go in the world, there's local cheeses, and it's really fun to go into the supermarket and see all these different varieties and try them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Timea, anything to add on that, on the cheese landscape and your perspective on things that are going on and challenges that maybe we're experiencing in the world now?
Sure. I mean, I would more, I think on the challenges we have experienced on the customer level, where on our customers who are the dairies. So the whole story, how it started, that we started working on Taste It is because we realized, like, of course, we have these beautiful, great solutions providing very great ripening to the products, but how we can actually demonstrate the flavor to a culture that is basically you buy in a bag you can't see, it's not having a color. It's difficult. It's not like you go to the shop and you say, I want a blue color and I want to paint my wall with that. So it's difficult once you just have just a bag of culture to see what kind of flavor this will develop in the cheese. So it was crucial for us to get a toolbox that can mediate the discussion, and that is also how we then ended up developing this tool, a tool where we can collect and capture the feedback of our customers, or even in internal when we develop our products, to capture how people perceive the flavor of these products, and then being able to use these dashboards to provide a really good base of discussion. So that is more on the challenges I have seen previously, where we had some tasting sessions and these were maybe not so structured. Now we can feel like with this tool we have elevated our tasting and sensory experiences and analysis to something much more professional. Also, when we go out to our customers, I believe that they also perceive these tasting sessions much more efficient and professional. So for me, the challenge was how we demonstrate the value of these products, and I think with this tool we can much better do.
And just to piggyback on that, if I could, one of the biggest challenges we have is the education and the limitations of opinion that you have with customers, whether it's our customers or it's the final consumer. It's knowing how to put the word to the flavor. It's knowing how to describe that to one another. And in reality, you don't ever really have those conversations with anyone. You don't actually sit down with your family and say, okay, taste this cheese and let's talk about it. No, we don't. You just give it to your kid and they like it. Great, we'll buy it again. But putting the words to it is really difficult, and it's hard to find a place to do that. And so with an experience, with a tool that you can gather around and give your information to and look at on a screen and understand, what are we here for? Where's this conversation going? It's a much deeper conversation than you would have beforehand, where, like Timea was saying, here's our culture, try it out. If you like it, you can buy it. No, let's taste it and figure out, is this where we want to go? Do you want to go this way? Do you want to go that way? Okay, we can add this, we can change this in the process. It becomes a much deeper and richer conversation. So the challenge is that conversation that has never existed before, or exists in a very limited way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, taste is a very abstract thing for people to describe, as you mentioned. Like, we all think we understand it, but you understand it in your mind's eye. You don't talk about it. And then the other thing, of course, is language and communication about this. And plenty of people think that they're experts about it, and oftentimes they may or may not be, but it's really about having a conversation in the same language in order to move the co-development forward or something like that. Right.
Yeah. And I think I would just add on that, as now Robert mentioned, it is also an educational tool. So the more you use it, the more we become knowledgeable on knowing how to put words on what we experience. And that's, of course, coming with the time. The more, of course, we taste, the more experience we have, and the better we can describe or put values on the perception. But the other thing, what I really, really like on the tool is that we have this ability to like the pair-based rating, let's say. That's kind of my favorite, what we brought into this tasted tool, and that's also something very special that you are offering, right? It's also a patented algorithm that is behind it. I really like that not only trained sensory can do and give a valuable, let's say, result or like answer. You don't need to make calibration prior your tasting sessions, and that's, I think, it's what we always had a bit of a discussion with the technical mindseted people, like, yes, but it's not really sensory. Yes, it's true. It's not like how we would do on a sensory lab we have much higher elevated ways of doing. But when you are in a customer setting where we know often we can't train people, or often we don't have the time to calibrate, like let's say this value 1 means low bitterness, value 5 means high bitterness. So in that sense, these paired-based rating helps us to just compare on, is it more sweet or is it more bitter? So that I think it's a really good value in the tool that thanks to you we can have in our product now.
Well, glad to hear that. I mean, of course, there's so many things that are abstract in life where, again, it's in the eye of the beholder. And I mean, in so many forms of communication, and taste is, I think, one of them that for the food industry is like paramount. I mean, as Marlene said, like people buy it because of taste. It's an indulgence. It's something you do each day. So with that in mind, maybe we can go back a little bit in time, Robert, if you can tell us a bit about cheese traditional production versus modern production. And we're talking a lot about digital and tools and things like this. Well, I mean, even sensory science was only invented in the mid 20th century. So, but cheese has been being made, I mean, since, I think thousands of years, right? So like how much of the traditional methodologies do you think make their way into what happens now, and how much is completely different? And maybe if you could reflect on that evolution a little bit in the time.
Absolutely. As modern as we've become, you're never going to beat Mother Nature. You're never going to shift away from what has already existed and has millions of years ahead of you in the form of survival. And that goes down to the tiniest little microbes. They're the ones that are driving everything. And as you said, the first time milk was put into a clay vessel of some kind, whether it was a just little ramekin or a dish of some kind, and left out, and it started to dry up and it started to form into little curdle parts, and somebody tasted it and said, that doesn't taste too bad. Maybe if I do it again, it will get better. Or maybe if we make it bigger, it'll get better. Maybe just understanding that what is happening in front of you is almost like magic, but it's actually living things trying to survive and make more of themselves and replicate themselves. That's microbes' entire existence, is to exist, make more, exist, make more. And so harnessing that becomes really important. And as more productions get made, or either by accident or on purpose, you start realizing, well, there's ways we can influence. And then became, well, we've got wooden barrels now. So if we put milk into a wooden barrel and we heat it over fire, okay, let's try it. Well, it gets a little richer. It's a little more. There's something else going on here. There's something about that wood that is amazing, that's imparting some flavors to it. It's got to be the wood. Well, in part, they're right. It's not the wood putting flavor into the milk. It's the wood having nooks and crannies where tiny little things like mold and yeast and you name the microbe can exist in a really incredible diversity, but that exists in diversity over a millennia that starts to become the norm in an area. So that anytime you put milk into that wooden barrel and heat it up over 8 logs of wood for so many hours, you're going to get a milk that is starting to change into a product that cannot be anything else than it is, which is where we have our classic traditional cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano, like Swiss from the Alps, any of the cheeses from France as well. All of them are born out of tradition, but just repetition and consistency in everything that's being used. In modern times, though, we don't use wooden barrels to make really the largest productions of cheese and dairy. We're using stainless steel, we're using clean, and we're trying to be as efficient, consistent, and as safe as we can be for those who eat it in as large consumer base as possible. That doesn't change things. What it does is it just shifts the idea of the wooden barrel used to make our product. Now that we have this stainless steel, we have to drive the product in a certain direction. And ways of doing it, add nuance, but it does go back to consistency. It goes back to consistency, not in the form of just what you use, but the way that the entire operation operates. So the people that you have, the cleaning that you have, the maintenance that you do, all of that consistency, including even HVAC. We've had situations where people have air ducts that can bring in air from the outside, and it just so happens that it can bring in a little floating microbe. If you're not careful and not filtering, that can infect an entire production and change it. So it's all of that, being aware of it. We're more in charge of making the product as opposed to just the microbes that used to make it because they existed in a place. So it's that dichotomy, but we can still learn from Mother Nature. We still know, in our case, certain microbes, certain molds, certain yeasts, like this temperature, like that temperature for this long process. You can put them into the storage environment that's a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler, maybe with more things next to each other. So there's a little more humidity next to one another. All of that comes into play, but the knowledge of that is still there. It's just applying traditional thoughts of flavor to how can we get that currently with the modern system. And there are tons of different ways. And what we're also learning is nuance is really important. And you can restrict. You don't have to be impactful with the things that you add to your production. You can actually restrict and get some differences in a very subtle way, create depth of flavor as opposed to a splash of flavor that maybe only 1% of the customers will like. So it's an interesting dance, but it does go all the way back. You know, you're never going to beat Mother Nature, so learn from it and maybe try to guide it and give it. You become far more of a shepherd than a chef when you make cheese. Okay. You're just trying to wrangle all this life into here's this pen and then here's this plot of land, and you keep moving it around, as opposed to being a chef where you're adding salt, you're adding pepper, you're adding. It's completely amazing when chefs do what they do, and they do it in the moment. And in cheese, it's moment to moment to moment to moment, and you're constantly trying to guide. So it's a
even
different,
more so than wine potentially. And it's
yes,
I mean, like because wine is it's a vintage, and then you ferment it. But what you're talking about is that like there's a whole process with many varied steps that can all impact the output, right?
Yes. And in wine, it's actually the landscape, it's the place, the changes in the environment that you have to be aware of, and then you have to guide in the vat, whether it's in steel or it moves to a wood barrel situation. You have to be able to guide it and make it just so to make some sort of consistency, or you declare a certain type of vintage or a certain existence in flavors. So there's a lot of actually playing with the understanding of the flavor in wine based on the year that it is, where we don't do that with cheese. But there are changes, there are differences in productions. The fact that you can get any amount of consistency in cheese production is actually a magic trick. It's amazing that customers that go and buy the same product over and over again don't necessarily sense, well, this is completely different. They sense a little bit, but they do find the thing that they crave the most, that flavor that is the most unique to that product and that their family probably likes and they can use in many different ways. When it doesn't work, that's when they start to look for something else. Usually it's in texture. Usually it's in the meltability and the shreddability. That's first noticed before flavor, because you can see when you cook something how it changes, as opposed to when you eat something, it's hard to detect, was this the same from what I tasted before, unless you're really focused on it.
Right. Yeah, I suppose that, I mean, I mean, there's some types of cheese that I definitely can tell the difference. I mean, I eat a lot of cheese, but talk about innovation though. Like to hear you describe the history of how cheese making kind of evolved, I would presume that a lot of that has to do with also preservation of the food supply, right? Like because you can't leave milk around, and you have to find a way to keep it. And then there would most likely be a mixture of taste, but also practicality. Like why did Swiss cheese evolve in its way and feta in another? And of course, there are different milk supplies in different places. So there's all this history of circumstance and luck and experimentation that creates these incredible varieties of cheese that in particular you have in, I mean, places like Europe, you have a lot more varieties than say in the United States. So there are different types of cheese. How now, when you think about innovating and creating maybe new varietals or flavors, how do you push those edges of the envelope rather than just kind of going after like the perfect Gruyere or something like this? Are cheesemakers doing that?
Actually, it's interesting because before I've worked in the cheese industry since 2001. I worked in retail and then went to importing and then got on the trade side to help out artisan cheesemakers actually. And most of them would come to me with, I want to make the French Comté. I want to make like a Manchego. I want to make this. I want to make that. And so the first thing you think about is, well, you can't make that, because you don't have the milk and the animals and the place from where it's made. Okay, but you want to make something in the vein of, we're going to make your product. So yes, we're going to have a target of flavors, but let's be flexible enough to understand it's not going to be the same. Maybe you can make something that's brand new. And one of them, a best example, is someone like Hatch in Uplands, at Uplands Cheese in Dodgeville, Wisconsin, who liked the idea of, there's a cheese actually in your area in Switzerland and also in France. One in Switzerland, it's called Fosterkäse. In France, it's called Mont d'Or, Vacherin Mont d'Or. In Switzerland, it's Krumensweiler Fosterkäse, and it's a bark wrapped like soft cheese that has a little bit of a bacteria, yeasty, moldy rind on the outside, but on the inside, it's like custard. You can spoon it out. So he wanted to make that style if he could and try to get as close to the original. Of course, he didn't. He has different animals. He's in Wisconsin, but yes, you can get bark, but it's going to be different from the bark that's in France and Switzerland. But learning that and understanding, okay, let's get the texture right first. Let's get that process and maybe the flavor well, and understand it, and then see how it evolves in their aging facility. And then, is it good? Do people like it? Is it being sold? Yes. Can we continually improve it? And it's a constant talk or discussion about what else do we need to do? Do we need to maybe age it a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler? All of those pieces, including the packaging, because that has an effect on it as well. So it's a conversation when you start with a cheesemaker that wants to make something new that never ends. That's the best part about this, is that cheese is always evolving and always trying to improve, no matter what it is. Even the traditional cheeses, there are conversations that we have with those cheesemakers in Europe as well about how to continually just elevate if possible, if they need that. And it may not even include our solutions. Sometimes it's just the discussion. And being a part of that discussion is something that we need to continue to support. As Christian Hansen, also as you can tell, it's a conversation that I never end, because it's something new. And innovation is far more looking to other worlds of fermentation, bringing in those flavors. I think we're going to see a lot more cross breeding of fermentation styles, of flavor, of texture. You're going to see more of that. And that's exciting, because yes, it may crop out of a need for something that's not dairy based, but in effect, it will actually trail its way back to the dairy world because it creates nuance and different flavors. So it's an exciting time right now, because fermentation is a pretty hot topic, and people making stuff at home. I do my own at home as well. And when you find certain flavors, you start to think, as someone who works in this industry, could that flavor exist here? Could that flavor exist there? And what would happen if we did this? Would it break down the texture too much? Would it not work because it breaks down texture too much? Or would it work because it breaks down texture a lot? So there's so many things to think about, but it's great to have partners that we do with all of our customers globally who are willing to do that and willing to try. And yes, we can always make a reference back to the traditional. We can go back and say, this is what I remember, and this is why I think this exists. Try it out. And if it doesn't work, most of the time we can find something positive out of every trial to then build on. And again, ongoing conversation that will never end.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's just so many cool varieties of cheese. I mean, everyone has their sort of favorites, I believe, but it is one of those things which you're willing to try something new. Like, you see it on the shelf, you kind of feel it. It's hard. Okay, I know I like hard cheeses. I'll give that a try. And then you can discover something that's totally new. And then you end up being a regular consumer of it, even though by name, you may not recognize that, right?
Correct. We buy with our eyes.
Yeah.
We taste, we experience, we try. If we like it enough, that's the piece. Why does someone like it enough to buy again? Right. What is it that brings them back? And as Marlene said, flavor is king over all of it. And so if you can deliver on that flavor the first time, whatever that might be, that's really the win right there. Right. But again, you're going to see a lot more experimentation, even in the purchasing of cheeses, of wild cheeses. There are products being made well, they're not making it here yet, but they're being made high in Tibet, actually, from yak. There's a lot of South American water buffalo cheeses and ghee being made from them as well. That's going to start filtering its way all over the world as they continue to grow. And so there's burgeoning communities of people making really unique products that are going to start making their way outside of their locality just to make an impact, because there is a need for something new, different. And how can we learn from each other?
It sounds like craft beer,
it's very much similar becoming that. And a lot of it has to do with the enthusiasts who want to see it brought into their area. So a lot of cheese shops, a lot of just people who are in that world who want to see that product exist in their local store.
Yeah, it brings some variety to, I mean, everyone has to eat and usually have the same staples around, but it brings some variety to what you're doing. Sounds awesome. Sounds really interesting. Okay, so what about sustainability? I mean, this is a big topic these days. I mean, of course, everyone has their opinion about the use of real milk and different products. And I mean, I think that, you know, in Switzerland, we don't eat a lot of meat. I think it's not a real meat eating country, but man, we have a lot of cheese everywhere. So the the main protein source, at least in my family, is cheese. And I think that's similar amongst many. But, you know, sustainability is an issue, you know, animal welfare, you know, water. Maybe Marlene, you could talk a little bit about that, or Robert, if you know, do you see changes happening in the industry? I mean, clearly, you know, husbanding our resources is important as we go forward in the population growth.
Yep, I can start maybe, and then Robert, you probably have more that you can add in here, but there's no doubt that for the Chr. Hansen customers, the dairies, that this is really high on the agenda. So it's important that we as a partner for the end product, that we can support in the whole sustainability footprint that they have in the dairies. So we have different activities and different ingredients that we can support in the way that they have reduced carbon footprint. So I think that is pretty cool that we are partner in that journey for each dairy. I just wanted also to add a bit into this story journey that you talked about before, because everything we have here from Chr. Hansen is of course based on the nature, and we have a very big collection of bacteria strains, more than 40,000 in our collection, and these are all of course part of the heritage that we carry on. So going into this, we call it the power of the good bacteria, that we can then add in and use what we had back in the days, and then now adding it into a safe environment, and also this that you need to have like a shelf life, that maybe also need to export your products, so that we are aware that the safety and the whole the power of the bacteria is in a good condition and safe for consumers. So I think that is really also reflecting the journey for the cheese industry. But the part about the sustainability and the yield, like they have the dairies, they have the milk, and if they can get more cheese out of that volume of milk, then it's really a good way forward for them, and also for the footprint of the products. So maybe Robert, you are maybe better in talking about it, or have more examples.
Well, I mean, there is going to be aggression, of course, of some kind, with the lack of resources as well for farms and such, but that shouldn't completely derail or destroy the global production. What it means is, yes, if you're big, if you have a lot of animals, if you have a lot of milk, there's also in the cheese side a lot of byproduct that comes from it, a lot of whey. And so we are seeing a lot of work being done on converting that whey in many different ways. There's a lot that's been done with digesters to create energy, as opposed to, you know, just taking it from, you know, the city, which also does feedback in some production sites, especially back to the town that those plants are in. We've also seen whey being turned into beverages as well. We're seeing alcoholic drinks being made. One in particular at Cornell, was born out of Cornell University. And it's great. I mean, a great professor who then created a side production out of it, and is taking whey and turning it into, you know, a spirit of some kind of beverage. So there are ways to make the waste products from productions have another life and have less of an impact on our waste that we put out there. But it's a challenge, and it's hard to balance it completely, but we try to do our part. And as Marlene said, you know, we have all these strains that continually are being evolved, but also our productions are being evolved, our facilities are being evolved to be more green and to reduce as we can. At the same time, with some of our customers, we're trying to help them reduce maybe the amount of ingredients. Let's say if there's, in a dairy situation, of using starch, of using sugar, of using extra protein, if there's a way that they can use less by using a culture to produce those that they're looking for, then that saves the need to purchase those products and get them from point A to point B. And it's a huge problem right now with not just price, but availability of many different products. So with that said, can you get more out of nature as opposed to the addition of and the use of, say, semi-trucks to bring everything across and boats to bring everything across all over the world. It's a continual look to how can we reduce but still have, and if not, maybe even improve our products. And we're trying to do it with our strains. So that's a continual thought in our mind as to how much of an impact we have.
And do you see more dairies shifting a greater percentage of their production towards cheese? I don't know the exact statistics, but I'm pretty sure that less milk is consumed in, raw than it was 30 or 40 years ago. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
well, possibly. I mean, if you compared it, for decades, yes, but it's not completely been tipped towards all the cheese side. We're not there yet. So there's still an opportunity for that to happen. And even availability of milk is important because of the high consumption of drinking milk still. So there still is a desire for it. It's just not touted as much.
And what about plant-based alternatives to creating cheese? I mean, everything you've just described and all of the chemistry and everything that goes into that, when you take a totally different substrate, it's got to be pretty challenging to create something that is really a cheese or even near what it'd be, right?
Absolutely right. Completely different. It's far more like making beverages, fermented beverages, than it is like making fermented dairy. And so you're constantly chasing the base of, this base of green peas, this base of fava bean, this base of lentils. They all react differently. They all come from different sources. And now you have to also consider their microbial load that comes in. And there's so many things to think about, and they're far more of a combining together there of different ingredients, as opposed to adding cultures in and then seeing multiple different outcomes. Many times you add cultures, you do see outcomes, but you still influence from this and the other additions to it. My hope is, yes, as you're going towards that target of making an alternative Vigert, is what we call it, an alternative cheese, maybe understand and have concessions that you're not going to be exact, and try to make something unique, try to make something different. And we're seeing that, where people are trying to understand this is not dairy. So, okay, what can we get out of it that will be that craveability, that will be that desire for more? There is a burgeoning consumer base that wants it in their markets, but still trying to figure out what it is that is the most repeatable is still unknown. It still continues to fluctuate.
Yeah, some of the ice creams I've had are pretty good, and the yogurts. I mean, but it's different than the meat product. Even for me, I'm an older consumer. I view them more as another food form, right? That's tasty and can be consumed. Whereas with the meat products, I believe that they've really tried to make the analog. And then, of course, the consumer expectation is totally different. And I wonder if therefore because I think the dairy technology is really evolved well, but it's also that there are, like a plant-based yogurt, it's not yogurt, right? But it tastes pretty good, right? I mean, it's a fine thing to eat, but I don't expect it to taste like yogurt. I would expect yogurt to taste like yogurt, right?
And that's fine. It should be celebrated. Just like we were talking about with the vintners, who make wine and they give an influence from a certain vintage. Talk about the flavors that you got out of this production. Talk about what your consistency is bringing and celebrate that as the product that it is. Because as you said, it is an alternative. It's another different, it falls into a new category. So drive that category. If you're making, why was beer and wine made? It was made to drink water that was safer. You needed to boil it. All right. Can we also make it taste a little bit better? Because the first time we had a whole bunch of, wheat stalks in a clay pot and rain got in there and then things started to bubble up and we tasted it, made us feel pretty interesting, but it didn't taste that great. Can we make it better? Okay, what if we heated it up? Okay, what if we, but it's to make your survival a little more enjoyable, but a little more repeatable, and also something you can teach, pass on, and then have it continue to evolve. So same thing here. How will this evolve? I'm curious to see, because there's a lot of pushback and there's a lot of thought that, well, no, we're dairy people. We don't want to get into that. That's fine. But what about those flavors? So the opening of the mind will come when there's a lot more crosstalk, a lot more. I'm interested in what you're doing. I'm interested in what's going on here. Maybe there's something we can learn together. Once that happens.
Sorry, being a commercial person, I don't really understand why there would be pushback, because I would think that a lot of the expertise is crossover, And then
Mhm.
also, of course, you have supply chain and distribution and retail chain and all those relationships, which are also crossed over. Yes, I understand you have the responsibility to your farmer cooperative, right, and your dairy farmers. But I mean, there's plenty of demand for all of it to go around, it seems, right? So,
Absolutely. So embracing it is kind of the piece that needs to happen, but it has to come from the consumer too. Do they want it? Do they want it? They want more of it. Is there enough supply that's actually being demanded to push more creation of it? Then it becomes a little bit more of a talk of, okay, how can we marry maybe these things together? And then there will be a little more acceptance on every side.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's also to rethink and renew the whole industry, because when it comes to cheese and everything is so settled and we have known it for so many years. So when it comes to bacteria and enzymes, and that is really what Christian Hansen is super great at in the dairy area, we have to also rethink like how will feeding these bacteria with a new substrate, what will they then deliver? Because today we are pretty aware of these kind of flavors, we can get that out of them when we feed them and treat them well with the ripening temperature and all that. But thinking that into a total new food technology and a new matrix, that is it's still to be explored.
And hard to make consistent. That's the thing.
Exactly.
We've seen some alternative bases with certain bacteria that we know has this effect in dairy turn into wild flavors like roasted chicken skin when they didn't want that in the product that they were making, but it exists. You can taste it. So there's a lot to learn, continue, and it's production to production as opposed to just overall one big production. It's actually every batch that you have to really scrutinize still. So once that gets into a lot of information gathered, a lot you can actually pinpoint and understand what's affecting all these changes because the bacteria is in there with that certain base at this certain time, with this certain water, with this certain, everything, then you can start guiding a little bit further. But that said, the alternative products that are out there are far better now than they were. So the improvement is been seen. And so it's great to see it. The acceptance is going to take a little bit of time, but those who like it and purchase it, they're dedicated.
Yeah. I was in Israel for a couple of weeks ago and I had some dairy ice creams and I would have been happy to have that for dessert. Right? No problem. So some not plant-based dairy. So with that, maybe we can talk a little bit about how you interact with customers in this co-creation and communication. It sounds like you might need a whole other career to figure out, all the new ways in which these new substrates will work. And so that probably a lot of opportunities for using data and interaction with your customers in doing this. Maybe, Timea or others have comments on how you're approaching that problem, because that's, I would think that's a lot of value add for an ingredient company where, the faster you can help your customers get to a solution that's something that's totally new, the more benefit that you're going to be able to provide to them and help their innovation cycle be faster as well, because there's a lot of questions to answer about the imparting the knowledge that you've got onto what they're trying to do. Right?
Exactly, you are fully right on this, Daniel. So I think Robert, you mentioned also here how cheesemakers it was very important that they choose the right flavor, flavor direction they want to develop the next new innovation, new product, because flavor is really crucial, and we often have experience that customers or our customers come back to us and say they want a different flavor, a new flavor, it was often difficult to define what is that they want. So the tool provides us much more clarity, because we can start up somewhere and much more faster make it from this wide perspective of new flavor, which could be anything, by using these 12 attributes or like associations, picture associations. Then we know which direction we want to kind of make it slim it down our pinpoints. So we are not just shooting all around, but in a little bit more a narrow direction. So I think that one, of course, really fastens up our our co-production together with our customers, and also the way that we can capture this information from the very beginning and start making projects with them and have historical data to compare to each other. Let's say we make a tasting the first week, or I don't know, 5 weeks after production, and then a week after and the week after, and being able to compare this data. That actually helps us a whole lot to see, is it developing our cheese, our product, in the direction we want, or is it not? Are we actually on the right path or not? So I believe that this tool gave us a really a good toolbox, or like a good way to do this process in a shorter time. And it's also now, I think you mentioned, some of you here, about the different languages that we have. So Christian Hansen operates globally, so that means also that we have production and sales teams all over the world, and the fact that we here at this tool we can apply different translations, that is also helping a lot, because then we can have these tasting sessions in the mother tongue, because it is already quite a complex thing, as you said, to talk about flavors. But then when you want to just talk in a foreign language, then it is fully different. Like the flavor, it has its own culture. The whole way as you experience a caramel, it might be fully different in US as how you experience it in Europe. So you would put a different word when you describe the caramel flavor. And I think that's then probably something that you also know a lot, like how you have these definitions. So it's just it's very important that we have the translations also. And yes, please go ahead.
It's interesting to hear. Yeah, I think on the internationalization side, again, we were just talking about all these varieties of historical products that have been, evolving in cheeses and things that human beings did to preserve themselves and feed themselves over many centuries. Now we're trying to, as an industry, digitize this discussion and try to become smarter. And I think this is a particular challenge that the food industry has, is that it is a special language. It's not black and white and leather or wood. It is a very abstract description to even understand what your target is. And I think in this regard, sensory actually is kind of underappreciated. And then also trying to understand the consumer's kind of perception of that. And perhaps in your case, your customer is a representation of that consumer, because you're dealing with the customer in China. They're most likely from the region, and they also understand, that language, and they understand that kind of like localization. Whereas, someone coming from a different country would be really, fish out of water in that respect, right? So,
if I could add to that real quick, sensory being as important as it is, making it memorable, making the experience memorable, with being able to measure it at the same time and capture it in a moment is really impactful, because you need that to be memorable for those you're working with. But the memory you need to create for those who are tasting, it could be their first time doing this, is that you listened to them, you made them a part of it. And so, for example, I've run experiences that are almost, in a sense, calibrating my understanding of who the customer is, as opposed to me trying to show them, here's what something tastes like, by pairing these cheeses, for example, to things like music. And having people actually rate how closely or do they think these two things go together, because there's some similarities you can do, because this is all sense. But when you use something unique like that, and you ask for music from the people who are participating before they get to it, they now have an investment in it, and they want to see what you can do with it. You may be completely wrong, or you may have, the opinion will say what it will say, but it's not showing off what we know. It's actually creating a situation that never existed before, but it all is focused on the sensory of the product that they're tasting. But it's creating a memory that says, this is something, a conversation that I can have again, because now I have a connection that I didn't have before in a unique way. So this tool actually helped create that for me. And I've done it for multiple different groups. And each time it's done, it's extremely memorable. And then you do get the next question is, can we do this with this product? Can we do it with that product?
Yeah.
They want to experience it again, or they want to share the experience with other people. So the repeatability becomes the excitement over something unique. But if you can keep going back to the product that they're trying to rate and bring it into it, then it becomes information that you're learning constantly about that product and the attributes that are most important to that customer, that then you can actually help them and help guide them further going forward. Then it turns from an experienced, technical, analytical tasting. And that's the best part, is that this tool gives the ability, the flexibility to do something unique and fun to analytical and meaningful pretty quickly. So that's what I've really enjoyed the most from it, because having the flexibility and understanding that there's a lot of wide ranges of people and cultures and backgrounds and understanding of flavor, you need to be completely aware of that. And if you can bring all of them in at the beginning, then it becomes more useful in the future.
Yeah, I mean, people must love they must look forward to meeting you, Robert, because like, you put together these experiences. I've been thinking about a certain type of cheese that from my home area in Wisconsin. It's like a sharp cheddar kind of spread, which is red on the outside, but it's a soft cheese. I don't think I would really love to eat it here, although I can remember it in my mind's eye. But it's great when you're watching football games on Sundays, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there's like these situational cases that's exactly what you think about for the product, and it's super popular. Like every cocktail party I've ever been to in Wisconsin has this cheese. Right?
Of course. So, exactly. It's a memory that's never left.
Yeah. And I think that's the really cool thing about these localized products, which is different than, say, the packaged goods industry, where you're making like a particular chocolate, which is very standardized, right? I mean, you have this richness of culture, and you have it in wine, but again, like wine, wine is wine in a lot of cases. I mean, real wine connoisseurs. And the other thing, it's not something that children can enjoy, for example. Like it's great. I thank you. I appreciate the category of cheese much more now. I'm gonna have to talk to you.
I hope so.
Okay, so what about the future? Like, what about what do you think is going to happen in the industry going forward? What do you think is going to happen in the kind of the world? Obviously, everyone is thinking about the localized pressures of war and supply chain. Do you see things as continuing to march on with hiccups? I mean, obviously, we've been through these things before in history, but what's your opinion on this?
I'll let Marlene go actually first.
Thanks. Yeah, what we see right now is that it's still stabilized and even still growing in the cheese area. So I think it is definitely also here in the future. Might be that we have these other alternatives coming up, but I don't think that that will put down this big volume of cheese worldwide. What we see is that people are a bit more concerned about their health. So the whole health consciousness after Corona and what we have in the world now. So health combined into whatever occasion is really important. And then this about the heritage, that we still have this we all relate, or there's a story around it, or locally produced. So you relate to this, and you build good stories for that. Is also, of course, very emotional, but really what we are also seeing going ahead.
Great. Robert, Timea, anything to add? We're getting close to time here, so final points.
Well, I would again, adding on to what Marlene is saying, nuance in survivability. Yes, if people need to save a little bit more in their production, can they get more at the same time? And that's going to come with nuance. It's going to come with specific dosing. It could come with a lot more diversity of bacteria, maybe even yeast and mold, depending on the product. It'll come with a lot more trial, but hopefully with products that I think will make an impact without necessarily having a huge cost to it as well. That's kind of the piece. But the future, what I do see is, like I kind of mentioned it before, is a lot more cross fermentation knowledge and sharing and growing and unique kind of additions to one another. So it may not be adding to the other in the final, but learning from each other, maybe even learning about their microbes and adding them in different ways. So there will be a lot of experimentation, possibly even hybrid bases, where you do have a base of a vegetable and a base of dairy, and then crossing them at the same time into a production. So I can see something like that becoming possible in the future. It'll take a long time because it's very difficult to do that, but there's an opportunity there. So things like that, but otherwise it's just a continual desire for new flavor, for new texture, for new, what else can I do with this product? And the educational piece. I think the education for the consumer is going to continue to go up because there's an interest in fermentation right now. So we're going to see more of that. When I started on a cheese shop counter in 2001, you had no information from the producers. We used to get products from France that were farmhouse made, that came with no information, came with no name. You just got it and you called it from the place that it was from, and you would sell it. And in many cases, people made up stories about it. People just completely made up fabricated stories, but there was no way you could check about it at the time. There was no online information that you could find. And my way of was, okay, I want to know the place that it's from, maybe understand the other things that are, I can talk a little bit more about the scenario that this product came from, to give you a better sense of what you're tasting, as opposed to tell you for certain this is why it tastes the way that it does. But it's a shared experience. So more shared knowledge, more shared experiences around products, I think is going to be a new outcropping coming up as well, where it's not, I'm going to show you what I know. It's going to be, hey, we should talk about this. This is really cool. Let's all nerd out about it and really enjoy this product together. It becomes a connection to one another. So
yeah, I think that's great. That's great. I mean, it's so interesting to see that even in modern times, that kind of collaboration and innovation happens. I love these stories, for example, how like the beer industry came to America, and how, you know, the founders of these breweries came from Germany and they changed everything, and this kind of like evolved into a localized culture of it all. But I think it's great to see that there's still product categories that are evolving that way, because it makes things interesting, right? It's not just like the same old, and it's natural, right? And there's kind of like natural competition insulation, because the source of the product is local. I mean, you're not going to ship milk all over the world really effectively. So you kind of have to make things in a way locally, which I think, you know, also drives additional innovation. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty to learn and plenty to grow from as well. So it's exciting, and it will never stop being exciting, even with all the challenges in front of us. Yeah,
that's great. Well, thanks so much, all of you, for your time. I'll let you go, and, you know, it's shortly before the holidays here, so I'm sure everyone's busy. It's a busy time in the industry, and yeah, thanks so much for sharing this. You know, we'll put it online. Hopefully, that, you know, people will also gain a lot of insight into an industry that, you know, I think many people don't fully appreciate the complete background behind what they're getting from their cheese. But, you know, to your point, Robert, I think that, you know, people will start to appreciate more where their food comes from, and then, you know, the curiosity begins, and then you want to try more and more new things.
Agreed. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you too. And Merry Christmas then.
Thanks. Bye-bye.